Okay, in the last class we studied the model of old age insurance and its effect on savings. So we will continue from there and then we move on to other discussions. Okay, let me see. So last lecture, let me remind you a little bit of what we have done. So the issue here is that what are the relationship between private savings and pension contributions? Okay, so one extreme view is that pension contributions simply crowds out the private savings one-to-one. So in terms of total savings or to the welfare of the individuals, pension has no effect. So that is a case, for example, like this. Okay, so there are two assumptions here. One is that the pension and private savings have the same rate of return. Okay, so we call that actuarially fair pension. And second is that the individual was saving more than the required contribution. So if that's the case, the individual simply save less, okay? And then that decrease of saving is exactly equal to the amount of required pension contribution. So this is just a one-to-one substitution between pension and private savings. So in this case, obviously, it has no effect on the economy. At the end, it just changes the composition of total savings. So it was before only private saving, now it is private savings plus pension savings or pension contribution. But if we have an individual who saves less, okay, than the required pension contribution, then what happens is this individual will now save nothing, okay? So in that case, since this individual's total saving will increase, okay, even though the private saving becomes zero because of the public pension contribution. So that's what we talked about. And then we also have seen the case where that the changes in the rate of contribution. Okay, so when the government requires higher contribution, but then we have also two cases. One is that if the individual will save a lot more than even the new contribution, then no change. Okay, but in the second case where that individuals was saving but not as much as the new required contribution, then this individual will save nothing, but at the end, the total saving will increase. Okay, that's what we have discussed in the last lecture. Okay, now let's move on to a new situation. The situation here is that we assume now that the pension contribution rates of return is lower than the rate of return to the savings. Okay, so one possibility is that it is quite possible, for example, that the pension rule changes. Let's say for your case, we talked about that. Now many countries, including Korea, is facing the prospect of running out of money for old age pensions. Okay, then what can happen is that they may change the rule and pay you less. They can totally do it. Okay, as long as they can change the law, then they can change anything. Okay, so they may give you less than what you expect now, or they may collect you the more money from you guys. Okay, so basically, it is quite possible because of the financial problems with pension fund. Okay, they may require you to contribute more, but pay you less. So in that case, obviously, the rate of return to your pension contribution will go down because simply you will get less. Okay, that's quite possible, actually. I mean, it's probably going to happen. I mean, most likely going to happen. I'm 99% sure that your rate of return to pension contribution will go down. Okay. And second, it can be that problem basically is related with the problem. For example, let's say you have a pay-as-you-go system. Pay-as-you-go system is simply that they collect money from current working young individuals, and then they pay the elderly population who should receive the pension from that money they just collected from young people. Okay? So that works actually fine as long as, let's say, the population size does not change or even increase over time, right? So if the population size is increasing or is simply the same, and then let's say the percentage of working individuals stay the same, then we can expect that pretty much that basically this whole system will be just the same, because they collect the money, then they just give out the money to the elderly people. But in many countries, the population change means there will be fewer younger individuals. Let's say if you look at Korea, right? Our younger population is much smaller than, let's say, 10 or 20 years ago, actually. If you look at, for example, the number of students in middle schools or in primary schools, the number of people there, number of students there is way below the level that actually, your level, for example. So obviously what you are seeing is that population change means the pay-as-you-go system, if it stays the same, let's say the collection rate is the same, they will actually collect less. Okay? Which probably means that the elderly people will get less money because they collect less. Or the younger people probably have to pay higher percentage of their income as pension, and then when they are old, probably they will get less. Okay? So what it means? It means that rate of return to the pension is not as high as you actually expect. It is quite possible, so the rate of return to pension is actually smaller than the rate of return to private savings, private investment. Okay? It is very unlikely that rate of return to pension savings is higher than the rate of return to private savings. I mean, in the short run, probably it's possible, but in the long run, if you look at your whole life, okay, it's likely that rate of return to pension is smaller than the rate of return to private savings. So that's the situation we're going to talk about. So before we assumed that rate of return to pension and savings are the same, but now let's assume that private rate of return to pension is smaller. So what does it mean? It means basically when here this is before pension exists. Now we have a pension, but it gives you out a lower rate of return than the R. So it means that the diagram will change like this. Okay? What it means? Basically, you pay theta W as your pension contribution. It does not give you 1 plus R times theta W. It gives you 1 plus rho times theta W, which is smaller than 1 plus R times theta W. If it's a 1 plus R times theta W, it should be here. But it's, let's say, lower, 1 plus rho theta W. So it means basically your lifetime wealth will be smaller, right? If you have only private savings, okay, then your lifetime wealth is distributed along this budget line. Okay? But with your pension that gives you lower rate of return, your lifetime wealth basically goes down. Okay? So your budget line shifts inside, which means that you are poorer, okay, in total. Now, let's look at this individual. this individual is obviously a saver. So if R equals rho, then this individual will not change anything. But in this case, what you can see here is that now this individual is facing budget line, which is lower than this line. So this individual cannot actually attain the point E star. This individual will actually choose, for example, to have E2 star. What does it mean? It means, first thing, it means that this individual will actually increase, okay, not the increase, but in terms of total savings. In total savings, before it was C1 star to W. Now this individual's total saving will become C1 2 star to W. Okay? So that means this individual will actually in total save more. Okay, before what happened was if R equals rho, then this individual will decrease saving exactly this amount. But this individual will not, in this case, this individual will not decrease saving to this amount, actually less than this amount. There is a extra total savings, which comes as the form of private savings. Okay? So that means S star 0, okay, was, let's say, between C1 star and W. So W minus C1 star, let's say. Okay? That was the private savings. S star 0 was W minus C1 star. Now S star theta is C1 2 star. Now 1 minus theta W is bigger. So C1 2 star. Right? Okay? So which means that S star 0. So this basically, these are the private savings. S star 0 means that private saving with no pension contribution. S star theta is the private savings with the rate of theta as the contribution rate to the pension. So that is theta W plus minus okay. So this is the case, which is greater than theta W. Okay. Before, let's say there, if R equals rho, then the change in the savings is exactly equal to theta W. Okay? That was before the case. Rho equals R. But with rho smaller than R, the saving, okay, is change in savings is not exactly equal to theta W. Okay? It's, let me see. Yeah, that's the case. Okay. That is the theta W C1 star minus C2 star. So it should be greater than theta W. Which means what? Which means, what did he say? Yeah. So if S star 0 is greater than theta W, introduction of pension decreases private savings, but not as much as theta W. Smaller, sorry. That's why I was, should be smaller. Okay. This is positive number, so it's smaller. Not greater, smaller than theta W. Okay? So changes in savings is smaller than theta W. Okay? So in terms of total savings, the individual will save more. Okay? Why? It's simply because that this individual is facing the lower wealth, okay? So to prepare for the lower wealth, lower consumption, in the second period, this individual will save more. Okay. Now, let's look at the case. Oh, okay, that's the case. Now, let's look at the case where the individual was saving less than theta W. Okay, then what is the case? And actually, we have the same diagram pretty much. But now the theta W is much bigger than C1 star W. Okay. Then what happens? This individual will do E2 star. Okay, now what is the difference? Okay, the difference here is that before, what happened was that this individual, this individual was, let's say if rho equals R, then we are looking at actually the case of this individual, okay? So this individual was saving less than theta W. Now we have, then if that's the case, the individual will simply move from E star to E2 star, which means this individual is not going to save anything privately, okay? So that was the case. Now what happens here is that this individual now, okay, even though this individual is basically the spender, the same spender, but since the rate of return to pension is smaller than the rate of return to savings, the total wealth is going to be smaller. So this individual will now actually choose E2 star. It's not going to choose this point. So this point is the zero private savings. This individual will not choose this one, will choose actually E2 star. Which means this individual will actually save privately. Okay? Even though it's a spender, this individual will actually save. Okay? So that is the case that we're going to talk about. So what was this? This was the case where basically it's the same. Okay. Okay, and then C1 star W, which is smaller than theta W. Okay. So it's gonna be something like this. Let's see. So what is this? Star 0. So if rho equals R, then what happened was that S theta is 0. Okay? We're talking about this case. And if rho is smaller than R, then what happens here is that this one is greater than, no. What you're saying is that. So that's the difference. In this case, S theta is 0. In this case, S theta is positive. Okay? So what does this whole thing tell us? This whole thing tells us that the case where that the public pension has no effect on the economy is only a special case. Okay, the special case is, first, the pension is actuarially fair, meaning that the pension gives the same rate of return as the private savings. Second, the individuals are savers. Okay? If the two conditions are met, then introduction of public pension will not change anything. Okay? Other than if we exclude the case, let's say, for example, if the individuals are not all individuals are savers, okay, some of them are spenders, plus, or if the rate of return to public pension is lower than the rate of return to private savings, what we expect is the total saving in the economy will increase. Okay? That's the basically, at the end, that is kind of summary of the results. Okay? If rho equals R and if all the individuals are savers, meaning that they save more than what's required from the pension privately, then no effect on the economy. Then it means that if rho is smaller than R, or if the some of the individuals are spenders, then we expect the total savings will increase. Okay? So that is the this is kind of summary that I have just basically it's the same thing I talked about. Okay, so now we talked about the savings only for the reasons for savings, retirement. But obviously the individuals do not save only for the retirement. Okay, one of the reasons they save is called precautionary savings. This is a saving for the case of negative income shock. Let's say you lose your job, okay? Your health fails or something. So some negative shock to your consumption, the individuals needs to prepare for such cases, and we call them precautionary savings. Okay? So precautionary savings have nothing to do with retirement. Okay? So if that's the case, then obviously the retirement saving will change in response to public pension because they serve the same purposes. However, precautionary saving itself has nothing to do with retirement, so precautionary saving will not change even if public pension is introduced. Okay. So at the end, what happens? What we say is, all in all, an increase of contribution to public pension is likely to decrease private savings, okay, because we have savers, they'll decrease their savings, and spenders also decrease savings, but not one-to-one, less than 1-for-1. Okay. Okay. So in a way, the conclusion is some kind of in the middle. Okay, the introduction of public savings will not decrease the saving 1-to-1. Okay. But at that same time, it means introduction of public pension will not increase the saving as much as the pension contribution. Okay. So how the savings change will be in the middle. Okay, you know what I mean? Okay. Let's say if the 9% of the salaries should go to the public pension, then it does not mean that now we have savings that are additional savings that are equal to 9% of total salaries. It's not going to happen because people will save less privately, so the total saving will increase less than 9% of the salaries. Okay, but it's not going to be 0%. Okay, so somewhere in between 0 and 9. Okay, then what number? Okay, it's difficult to tell. Okay, it will depend probably on the proportion of savers and spenders. If you have more savers, okay, then the percentage is likely to be lower. If we have more savers, more spenders, then percentage will be likely to be higher, increase of total savings. Okay. Well, it depends on rate of return to pension and rate of return to private savings. If the rate of return for pension and rate of return for private savings are similar, equal, or very similar, then private savings will decrease even more. So the increase of total saving will be lower. But if the rate of return to pension is smaller than the rate of return to private savings, then increase of total savings will be higher. Okay? So we have all these different interactions that how the public pension will affect private savings and the total savings. Okay, I was thinking about drawing a diagram. So if I summarize what I have just said, that it will depend on what? What should I do? So if the savers proportion is high and low, then rho equals R, right? Then total savings if the savers proportion is high and rho equals R, then total savings will increase a little bit. Okay? Because the most of people will just, save less. If the spender is a lot, then it's going to be bigger than this one, obviously. Okay? Total savings will increase more. And if that's the case, then you increase, and this is basically the biggest, the last. Okay? So we have lower proportion of savers in the economy, and rho is smaller than R, then we see the total savings will increase the most. And this is the smallest increase in total savings. Okay. If savers proportion is 100%, then this is going to be 0. Okay? But if we think of precautionary savings, then it's not going to be 0. So all in all, that's what it just said. All in all, an increase of contribution to public pensions is likely to decrease private savings, but less than 1-for-1. So in total savings is likely to be increase, but by how much, it depends on these factors. Okay, so what are the empirical studies? Obviously, this is in this case, obviously, that you cannot tell which is the case. Okay, so theoretically, everything is possible. So you have to look at the data. So that when you look at the data, okay, then an increase of expected public pension benefit by $1 has been estimated to decrease private savings by 0 to 50 cents. Okay? So it will decrease private savings, but in some cases it looks like 0, so no private savings does not change at all. Okay? Or it can be as high as 50 cents, so 50%. Okay? So that is the basic idea. So one debate that we have looked at is that how it affects the private savings. Okay? In total, basically means that how it affects, actually at the end, individuals' welfare and their consumption behavior. Okay? Now, second case that I want to look at is the effect on upstream transfer. Okay, this is related with the family interactions. Okay, what is this? Actually, now the Korea, I think it's the percentage of this is smaller and smaller. But in many countries, especially in Asian developing countries, for example, a lot of money is transferred between parents and children. Okay? Actually, even in developed countries, a lot of money is actually transferred between parents and children. So obviously, for example, that let's say, you attend the university and your parents paid for, let's say, your tuitions. It's, in a way, it's actually transfer, monetary transfer from your parents to the children. But I'm not going to talk about that one. We are talking about, let's say, the adult child. Okay, so the child is working. Okay, then it is quite often that working child and parents, they exchange money. Okay, in some cases, okay, for example, the parents may help out their children. Okay, and in some cases, actually, children help out their parents. Let's say the parents are retired, has no other source of income. Okay, then it's quite possible that children actually support their parents financially. Okay. And actually, if you look at the data, actually the significant portion, a significant percentage of people actually give money to their parents. And you can find more cases mostly in Asian, actually even in African countries, in developing countries. One reason that why the developing countries have more of such case is actually, we are talking about this one right here. So we call that upstream transfer. It just means that it's a transfer from adult child to the parents, upstream. Okay. So downstream transfer is transfer from parents to child. Okay. So interestingly, if you look at the Western developed countries, most of the transfers between generations are downstream, from parents to children. It can be just money, or it can be actually the inheritance. They just, when they die, they just give money to their children. Okay. But if you look at the developing countries, in Asian countries in particular, many transfers are upstream, from child to the parents. So what you're thinking is that actually traditionally, in Korea, including Korea, upstream transfer was thought to be a main form of old age insurance for the elderly population. Elderly people, okay, they have children, and children grow up, and the parents are old, then children will support their parents. Okay, they may live together, or they may give money to their parents. So that is the form of, in a way, the traditional society old age insurance. So here, what we are thinking is that now we have a new form of old age insurance in terms of pension benefit. Okay? Then how it affects, let's say, the individual's lives. Okay? And obviously, we have looked at the case of savings, but also quite important one is this upstream transfer. So there are very interesting results about this. Okay, let's take a look at this. Now, so what we are thinking is the altruistic upstream transfer. Okay, what we mean by altruistic. Altruism means actually care for others, right? So an altruistic person is the person who cares for others. Then we call that an altruistic person. Okay, altruistic upstream transfer means that the child cares for their parents' welfare. Okay, so we are thinking about that case. Okay, so the money goes to the parents, not all cases, but when the money goes to the parents, it's because the child care about the parents' welfare. So what we are thinking is, first, the child earns income and the parent is retired. Okay? So we're thinking of an adult child and elderly parent, okay, who has no income other than, let me show you later. Okay, the child's utility depends on her own consumption, which is CK. K is a kid, so we use K. CK, so this is own consumption. And CP, P is parents, so CP is parents' consumption. So VCP is the parent's utility. Okay? The child cares her own utility plus the parent's utility. That's why we call this child an altruistic child. Okay? Because the child cares for the parents' welfare, parents' utility. Okay, we have gamma. Gamma is the degree of altruism. Okay? We assume it's between 0 and 1. Actually, we can assume anything, but it's likely to be between 0 and 1. Okay, 0 means the child doesn't care. Okay, the child is not altruistic. If it's 1, then the child cares about the parents as much as she cares for herself. Okay? It's possible. I mean, it's quite possible the gamma may be greater than 1, but it's more natural to think between 0 and 1. So she cares more about herself than her parents. Okay? So that's the usual assumption, okay, between 0 and 1. We can make it negative. Negative means what? The child wants to harm her parents. Okay, let's rule out that one. Okay, that's not good. That's not good. If it's greater than 1, that means that the child cares more about the parents than the child. Okay, we will see her in our textbook of great people. So we will not going to talk about it between 0 and 1. So normal person, okay, cares about the parents, but not as much as myself. Okay. Now, okay, the child, what happens? The child has her own income because she works, okay, but she needs to pay her pension. Okay, so theta is the pension contribution rate. So her disposable income is 1 minus theta times W. And she may transfer a part of her income to the parents. So we call that T. Okay? T is the upstream transfer. So T is the upstream transfer, which is, we assume it's greater 0 or positive. 0 means she doesn't transfer anything. Okay? It's one way that it happens is the gamma equals 0, right? If she doesn't care about her parents' welfare consumption, she has no reason to give money to their parents. So obviously, if gamma is 0, then T is 0. But that's not the only case. Okay? Even if she cares about her parents, she may not give any money to their parents. Okay? Depending on the situation that we will see later. Okay. And okay, T cannot be negative. It means that she cannot take away her parents' income. Okay. No, the theoretical, if gamma is negative, T is likely to be negative. Okay, because she cares about herself more, so she wants to. Yeah, that's possible. Okay, but let's not. That's just too depressing. Okay, now parents' consumption is simple. B is the old age benefit, the parents' own benefit. Okay, so she may have a pension from her own contribution, but it's fixed at B. Then T is the child's transfer. Okay, so it's very simple structure. Okay, get that? Now, let's see what happens. Okay, here what we have is that in horizontal axis we have child. In vertical axis we have parents' consumption. Okay? Get that? Okay, the child, if she does not give any money to their parents, okay, she will have 1 minus theta W as her own consumption, right? The total, the maximum amount she can get is 1 minus theta W. If it's 1 minus theta W, so it means that T equals 0, then the parents will consume only B. Okay? We use B0. Okay? So we will have B1 shortly, so we will use B0, okay? So that is the starting point. No transfer whatsoever, okay? And the extreme case is obviously that she gives everything to their parents, okay? The parents will have maximum consumption B plus 1 minus theta W, okay? But we assume that it is very unlikely, okay? So in this case, what is likely is that something like E star, okay? What is the E star? E star is the case where that she consumes some of her income and gives some of her income to their parents. Okay, so the parents get T, which is equal to this one, and so the parents' consumption is CP star is just B0 plus T. Okay, so that is the you can call the interior solution. Okay, so this is the case of interior solution. Get that? A simple solution. Obviously, we can think of corner solution as well, right? The corner solution is here. Okay, this corner solution is very unlikely. Okay, it's probably not going to happen. But this corner solution is quite possible. For example, like her indifference curve is steep. Okay, which means that if the gamma is very low, gamma is very small, then she cares more about her own consumption. That makes this indifference curve steep, then she may choose to have this one, okay? The zero transfer. Okay. The other case is if B is very, very large. We are talking about, right? We talked about this case. But it is possible that if B is large enough, something like this, okay? Make it even larger. We may have this case, okay? Get that? So one possibility is that I said the preference. So the child cares less about their parents. Then it is quite possible that the indifference curve looks like this. Okay? She doesn't transfer anything. The indifference curve is just steep. And second case is actually the parents is rich. Parent is. We are talking about parent. So parent is rich. Okay? If the parent is rich, then the child has no incentive to give money to their parents. It does not mean that this child does not care about their parents. The child cares about their parents, but there is no need to give money to their parents because the parents is rich enough compared to her. Basically, what's more important is relative wealth. Relatively, the child is poorer to their parents. Then the child would not give any money to their parents. Technically speaking, we can say that marginal utility of our own consumption is bigger than the marginal utility she gets from the parent's consumption. If that's the case, then she will not transfer anything. Okay? Then that the difference in marginal utility, when it happens when the parents is rich enough. So when even if she gives money to their parents, the increase of marginal utility of consumption for the parents is very small, because marginal utility is, the utility gonna be higher, but marginal utility is gonna be smaller because the parents were consuming a lot in the first place anyway. And then she's poor. So if she consumes more, her marginal utility will be much higher. If that's the case, then the child will see no need to give money to their parents. Okay? So in the data, I'm just saying, that in the data what you see is that when the upstream transfer happens, it usually happens to the parents who are relatively poor. Okay? That is, that is probably it's not surprising that relatively poorer parents get more money from their children. Okay, but here we are assuming the interior solution. We talked about the corner solution here, but we are assuming the interior solution. Okay, now what we are thinking is parents got richer. Okay? Let's say parents got richer, meaning that parents will get higher benefit, B1, for some reason. It's possible that the government decided to give extra money to their elderly parents. Okay, it is possible that they introduced like some kind of a new program for their elderly population. So elderly population will get higher income, okay, without affecting the child's income. Okay, she may get extra money from their government or some type of, let's say, if the government gives from some type of higher medical discount to the elderly population, so basically the same thing. Now what happens? B0 increased to B1 without changing anything else. Then you see this budget line will just shift up. Okay? I just wrote this 45-degree line, which means that in this case there is no rate of return or anything. This is just a transfer. Okay, so it's a contemporaneous transfer. So I give money from $1 of my money to my parents. Okay, just $1 and $1. So this is a 45-degree line. There is no rate of return or anything. It's just a simple transfer from $1 to my parents. So that's why it's 45-degree line. Okay, which means now what happens? It's just this whole budget line will shift outward. Okay, because B1 is higher. Now what happens? What happens is that now the choice becomes E2 star. Okay, what is interesting about this here is we see the parents' consumption will increase. Okay, that's expected because the parents now have more money. But what is somewhat surprising is the child's consumption increase as well. Which means why? Because now child will transfer less. Okay? Technically speaking, we can actually think of this idea as marginal utility idea I just talked about. Now the parents have more money. So marginal utility of consumption got smaller for their parents. Okay? Now relatively the child is poorer. I mean relative terms, right? Because the parents got richer means child got poorer relatively. So it means the marginal utility of consumption for him, okay, relative to marginal utility of parents got increased. Right? I'm talking about relative terms, not the absolute terms. Okay? So that means the child has less incentive to give money to their parents. So they will pay less to their parents. In other way, what happens? The increased income of the parents is actually shared between the child and the parents. Okay? Because this increased income, one thing that happens is that parents will consume more. But at the same time, the child will consume more. Okay? So which means this money is just divided between the parents and the child. Okay? Now, we just use the same idea here. Okay, basically a similar idea. What idea is this? Now, let's say the government says to the child, you have to contribute more to your own pension. Which means here the theta 0 becomes higher, theta 1. So then what happens? It should not affect the parents at first glance, but what happens here is that now that this 1 minus theta 0, W becomes 1 minus theta 1 W, right? So the child's income, disposable income decreased, then this whole budget line will shift inward. Okay? Then what happens? E star becomes E2 star. So what does it mean? It means that child will consume less. Okay? Understandable, because her disposable income got smaller. But at the same time, the parents' consumption will also decrease. Why? She will transfer less to their parents in total. Okay? So what happens? In the first case, we have looked at the case where the parents got richer. And then this money is actually shared between the parents and child. In the form of child will now transfer less. Okay? In the second case, we have seen the case where the child's income got decreased, disposable income. Basically, we can say income the same way. Let's say, it is possible that let's say the child has a negative income shock, so the income got smaller. Then what happens? What happens here is that the effect will be on parents' consumption as well. So in this case, the loss from the child part is shared. Okay? Actually, we can have the same thing that if the parents lost their income, if the parents' benefit got decreased, basically we will see the same thing. The child's consumption will be smaller, not only the parents. Child got richer. The child got richer, then what happens? It's going to be the same thing. The child will consume more, but at the same time, the parents will consume more. So what happens? Actually, in this case, child and parents will share everything. Okay? They will share their income. They will share their consumption, the loss. Okay, so as I said, the benefits and burdens are shared between generations linked by altruism. It's actually, if you look at the budget constraint a little more carefully, then it's actually obvious. CK is, right? CP is, okay? And then if you look at CK plus CP, then it's actually just B plus 1 minus theta W. Okay? So that means that total consumption of child and parents, okay, depends on the parents' benefit and the child's income. There is no T, actually. Okay? It's like they are just one family. They just share the total income. So their total consumption depends on total income. Okay? It's like one family living together. Even though they actually technically live separately, but if they are linked, okay, via this altruistic transfer, it's like one family. Okay? So it doesn't matter who has higher income, who has income loss. The effect will be on both. Okay? That is actually a very interesting conclusion of this model, that the benefits and burdens are shared between generations linked by altruism. Now, we talked about altruism, the generations, because we are talking about old age insurance, but actually you can extend this same idea between family members as well. Okay, you're thinking about, let's say your parent, think of parent, husband and wife. Okay, if they share, if they are linked by altruism, okay, let's say the husband cares for their wife, or the wife cares for the husband. Okay, if that's the case, what happens? Their consumption will depend on total income. Okay, if the wife got income increase, husband will consume more. Husband got income loss, then the wife will consume less. Okay, So it's basically the same thing. Okay. So you can actually apply this model more broadly, just than parents and child. Sometimes, actually, some economists think of this model as a whole economy, right? Think of the whole economy. Let's say our people, we Koreans are linked by altruism. Okay, it's not likely, but no. But actually, if we extend, actually, it's not really theoretically. It's quite possible. It's quite possible. Let's say we care for our family members, right? We can accept that. Okay, we care for, let's say, think of your, not your, you are not your. Think of mine. Okay, think of, let's say, the spouses. Okay, you care about your spouses. Not only they just say you care about your spouse's family as well. Now, if you extend that, then your spouse's family will have other spouses that are not linked with me, but linked with them. Then if you just extend those links of altruism, then it's quite possible that this whole nation is linked by altruistic chains. Okay? So that's actually, it's theoretically, if you think about it, it's quite possible that all these altruistic chains works that way, then whole country is linked by altruism. Okay? So that is the, some ideas of some economists. Now, somewhat related with this one. Under the pay-as-you-go system, now think about this. Now think of the pension system that has pay-as-you-go. So pay-as-you-go means that the money collected from younger generations goes directly to older generations. But let's say their population size are same. Okay, so we reach the society that are very steady. So no change in the population size. Then it means that the collection of their parent from the child is exactly equal to the payout to their parents. Okay. Now, if they want to pay more to their elderly population, they have to collect more from their child, right? If the government decides to give $1 more to the elderly, that means $1 more from each child, right? That's how they balance the money, if the population size are same. Then if each family has just two persons, like parents and child, then what happens? What happens here is that parents got $1 more, but child got $1 less. Okay? Then when you look at this one, the parents get $1 more, but child get $1 less. That means what? Total income of the family will not change. Right? Which means nothing gonna change. Nothing gonna change to the child's consumption and parents' consumption. Because basically they just offset each other. Okay? That's the last part. An increase of the old age benefit funded by an increase of the contribution of the same amount paid by child is exactly offset by a decrease of the transfer of the same amount. Okay? So this just means that $1 more to their parents, $1 less to the child, and then the child will give $1 less to their parents. So parents will $1 more from the government, but $1 less from the child, same thing. Okay? The child have $1 less because of the government, but the child saves $1 by decreasing the transfer to their parents, so same thing. So at the end, it's just even out. Okay? So this is sometimes called Ricardian equivalence. So the idea goes here is that if that's the situation, in the pay-as-you-go system, changing the pension amount should not affect the individual's consumption. Okay? But obviously, if the contribution increases more than the benefit amount, so this is the case of Ricardian equivalence. Okay, so the parent's benefit increased from B0 to B1. Okay, then exactly the same amount decreased from the child. Okay, then if that's the case, no change. So E star is gonna be just the same. Okay, so this is a Ricardian equivalence case. But if let's say for the demographic reason, let's say the child's generation is smaller than the parent's generation. So if we give $1 more to our parents, okay, then each child should pay not just $1, actually more than $1, because we have too many parents. Then B0 to B1 increase is but decrease of child's income going to be much larger than increase of benefit. Okay. Now what happens? The whole thing just shifts down. Then the change from E star to E2 star means both generations will consume less. So in this case, it's a bit ironical, right? Actually, the government gives more money to their parents, but it ends up the parents actually consume less. Okay? Because the loss of their child generation is so large, okay? To compensate for the loss, the parents will consume less. So in this case, B increases a little bit, but let's say this whole thing decreases by a larger amount, then this whole thing will just become smaller, right? Then CK plus CP should decrease in total. Okay? So that's the case. Okay. So it is interesting that actually there has been lots of studies about Ricardian equivalence, okay, whether it holds. Okay. This whole thing is related with the pension issues, actually. So, for example, that we don't hear much, but let's say in the future, in 10 or 20 years from now, we probably hear a lot about the pension reforms, simply because we're gonna run out of money. Okay, then obviously this whole thing, is gonna be discussed a lot. How it will affect the private savings? How it will affect the transfers between individuals? We talked about the individuals between generations, but between individuals, then we will hear a lot about this. Now, so what happens here is it's like similar to savings in a sense that when the pension is introduced, okay, the effect on the parents, okay, will not be like as large as the increase of pension amount. It's going to be smaller because the transfer will be reduced. Okay, that's the basic idea. Okay, so if the parents got $1 more of their pension, the consumption of parents will increase, but not as much as $1. It's going to increase by less than $1. Okay, so that is the idea that we talked about. Now we talked about the altruistic transfer only, but there are transfers that are non-altruistic. Okay. For example, like in exchange transfer is actually quite common than you think. I'm not gonna. Okay, we will do this in the next class. Okay.